Ethan Drake wiped the sweat from his brow, the harsh light of the distant sun casting long shadows on the barren moon's surface. He had been working on his ship for hours, scavenging parts from old forgotten wrecks that littered the space around the neutral trade zone. A mechanic by trade, he had become an expert at making something out of nothing. He was used to the silence of space, the isolation, and the endless stretches of nothingness. Today, however, something was different. As he approached an old, derelict starship, its hull cracked and battered, something caught his eye. A soft, blue glow flickered in the dark. It wasn't natural. Curious, Ethan moved closer, his boots crunching on the loose rocks. He peered inside a broken viewport and saw it. A stasis pod, floating in the dark, undisturbed for who knows how long. The pod wasn't part of the wreckage. It looked far more advanced, almost out of place among the abandoned ships. The soft glow came from the pod itself, casting an eerie light around the wreckage. He ran a hand through his messy hair, unsure if he was imagining things, but something about the pod seemed important. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should just leave it alone. But his curiosity got the best of him. Carefully, he pried open the hatch, the metal creaking in protest. Inside, a woman lay suspended in a soft glow, her eyes closed, her skin glowing faintly like the stars themselves. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Alien, yes, but also impossibly beautiful. Her long, dark hair framed a face so perfect it could have been sculpted by the stars. He blinked, staring in disbelief. Her clothes were elegant, foreign, made of materials that didn't belong in this part of space. He had to admit it. He'd never seen anything like her, and he wasn't sure if he should feel awestruck or terrified. But one thing was certain. She was no ordinary woman. As he carefully touched the controls to awaken the pod, the woman's body jerked suddenly, her eyes snapping open. Ethan stepped back in surprise, his heart racing. The woman's gaze was intense, her eyes a deep shade of violet that seemed to shimmer with a strange otherworldly power. For a moment, neither of them moved, locked in a silent stare. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice low but commanding. It was clear she wasn't afraid. In fact, she seemed almost annoyed by his presence. Ethan, still stunned by her sudden awakening, blinked and tried to regain his composure. I'm Ethan. I found your pod. You were stuck here." She sat up slowly, her movements fluid, almost graceful. Her eyes scanned him quickly, and he could feel her studying him like a specimen. Her gaze made him uneasy, as if she were seeing through him, past the surface. "I am Lyra," she replied coldly, her voice filled with authority. "I am of the Starborn people, and you are human." Ethan was caught off guard. Starborn. He had heard stories, rumors about beings from beyond the galaxy, but he had never believed them. He wasn't sure if she was speaking metaphorically or if she actually meant it. Before he could respond, she continued. "You will help me," Lyra said flatly, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan raised an eyebrow, confused. "Help you? I don't even know who you are or what you need help with." Lyra's violet eyes narrowed. "You will help me, or I will make you." Her voice was sharp, like the edge of a blade. "You woke me from my slumber. You owe me." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't the way he had planned his day. He had been expecting a quiet salvage job, not an encounter with a mysterious alien princess. He took a step back, unsure of how to handle the situation. He wasn't one to get involved in galactic politics or royal demands. What do you want?" he asked, trying to remain calm. Lyra stood up, her gaze still locked on him. "I have been stranded here for far too long," she explained. "My ship was destroyed, and my people, my empire, has been waiting for me to return. I need to get back to them. But first, I need you to help me repair my ship. It is the only way to leave this cursed moon." Ethan's mind raced. He wasn't a starship engineer. He was a mechanic, sure, But this sounded like more than a simple repair job. It sounded like the fate of an entire empire depended on his skills. And yet the way she spoke, with such confidence and authority, made it clear she wasn't asking. She was demanding. "And why exactly do I have to help you?" he asked, his voice shaky but defiant. "Because," Lyra said with a wicked smile, "you are the one who woke me. And in my culture, that means you are now bound to me. By tradition, by law. You must help me. Or else." Ethan frowned, his mind struggling to keep up. "Bound to you? What are you talking about?" "You will see soon enough," she replied, her voice laced with mystery. "But first, we fix my ship." Ethan hesitated, unsure of what kind of trouble he was getting into. But there was something about her confidence, her beauty, and the strange pull she had over him, that made it impossible to walk away. "All right," he said reluctantly. "I'll help you. But we need to get this straight. I'm not your servant." "Got it." Lyra gave a sharp nod, her expression softening just a little. "You will help me, human. And when the time comes, you will put a ring on me." Ethan stared at her in confusion. "What? A ring?" "Do not question me," she replied with a slight smirk. "You'll understand soon enough." As they began to work together to repair her ship, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn he wasn't prepared for. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, the metallic smell of grease and oil lingering in the air. His ship, though now patched up, was barely holding together. Lyra's ship, on the other hand, was a different story. As she explained the repairs, her royal commands made Ethan feel like he was on a strange battlefield, one where every action was scrutinized, every word weighed. "You must connect the primary reactor to the auxiliary power grid," Lyra instructed, her voice smooth but commanding. "And be careful with the wiring. It must be done precisely." Ethan tried not to sigh. He had worked on starships before, but this was different. Lyra's ship was far more advanced than anything he had ever seen. The technology was sleek, alien, and the wiring was unlike anything he could recognize. But he couldn't just admit it. He had to figure it out, or he'd never hear the end of it from her. As he moved to the engine compartment, trying to follow her complicated instructions, Lyra watched him closely. Her violet eyes never left him, and he could feel the weight of her gaze on his back, like a hot brand pressing into his skin. "You're sure you know what you're doing?" she asked, her voice like smooth silk, though there was a hint of impatience in it. "I've worked on a lot of ships," Ethan replied, trying to sound confident. "Just never one like this before." "Good," she said, nodding, "because this ship is not like any other. It's the only one of its kind. And it must be perfect. My people demand nothing less." Ethan had heard enough about the Starborn to know that their standards were impossibly high. But the way Lyra spoke about her people, so distant, so royal, made him uneasy. This wasn't just about getting a ship fixed. There was something more to it, something much bigger. "So, what happens when we fix your ship?" Ethan asked, glancing over at her. Lyra's eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite place. "Once the ship is repaired, I will return to my empire. My people have been waiting for me. They will expect me to lead them, to restore order and peace." "And what about me?" Ethan asked, though he wasn't sure why he even cared. "What happens to me?" Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile. "Ah, that is where you come in, human." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember signing up for anything beyond fixing your ship." Her smile widened. "You will be bound to me, Ethan. You see, in my culture, when someone wakes you from a long slumber, they are indebted to you. They must serve you or marry you." Ethan froze. "What?" Lyra's smile didn't falter. "You woke me. You owe me." He stared at her in disbelief. "Hold on a second," he said, his hands raised in protest. "I didn't sign up for any marriage deal. I helped you out of a sticky situation. That's it." "Ah," she said, her voice soft but filled with meaning. But you must understand, human. The bond is not just ceremonial. It is required. To deny it would dishonor both of us. Ethan shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around what she was saying. But I'm not some prince. I don't have royal blood. I'm just a mechanic. Lyra's expression softened, her eyes gleaming with something deeper. You may not be royal, but you have qualities my people value. Your strength, your cunning. You are more than just a mechanic. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Was this some kind of joke? The idea of a royal alien woman demanding a marriage bond from him, a simple human mechanic, was absurd. Yet the way she said it, so calmly, with such authority, it didn't seem like a joke. It seemed serious. This is insane, Ethan muttered under his breath. I thought you would see it my way, Lyra said, her voice filled with quiet amusement. But you will. In time. He was beginning to wonder if this was all a terrible dream. Here he was, stuck on a strange alien ship, being told that he owed a royal woman his marriage. He wasn't even sure if he could call it that. It sounded more like an ultimatum. And Lyra wasn't giving him any room to breathe. Listen, I'm not saying I'll leave you stranded or anything, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. But I'm not some royal consort. You can't just expect me to agree to this. Lyra didn't look offended. Instead, she regarded him with a calm, almost pitying expression. You misunderstand, Ethan. This is not something I am offering you as a choice. It is a tradition, a law. To defy it is to defy my people, and that would be catastrophic. Ethan felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. His mind raced, thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. She was right about one thing. He wasn't in a position to argue with her, not with the power she wielded. Okay, he said, trying to remain rational. Let's just focus on fixing the ship first. We'll deal with this later. Lyra nodded, though her smile remained. Of course. But know this, human. Once the ship is ready, the bond will be made. There will be no turning back. Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had never signed up for anything like this. But as he glanced at the royal woman beside him, he couldn't help but feel that his life was about to change in ways he could never have predicted. Ethan stared at the tangled mess of wires and circuits in front of him. He had been working nonstop for hours, trying to fix Lyra's ship. The ship was beautiful, sleek, and advanced beyond anything he had ever seen. But right now, it was also a nightmare of alien technology that he had to figure out, or else he might find himself in even deeper trouble with the Starborn princess. As he worked, Lyra watched him closely, her violet eyes never straying far from his every move. She had been quiet for the past few hours, a calm but constant presence in the background. But every now and then, she'd speak, her voice soft yet commanding, offering more instructions. You're doing well, Lyra said, her voice low and almost admiring as she approached him. But be careful with the power relays. If you misconnect them, it could overload the system. Ethan nodded without looking up. I got it, he said, though he wasn't entirely sure. He was doing his best, but Lyra's ship wasn't like anything he had ever worked on. The technology was far beyond human capabilities, and he had no idea how he was pulling it off. It was like trying to fix a spaceship with only half the tools. Suddenly, Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. Ethan, I've been thinking. He looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. Yeah. About what? She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, as she leaned against the ship's console. About the bond, she said, her voice steady but carrying an edge. You still don't understand, do you? Ethan sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. I understand perfectly well. You want me to marry you, right? Lyra's expression didn't change. It's more than that, she said softly. It's not just a marriage. It's a union of our worlds. It will bring peace between humans and the Starborn, a bond that can never be broken. Ethan shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. You keep saying peace, but it sounds more like an order. I'm offering you a chance, Ethan, Lyra said, her eyes locking with his. You may not see it now, but you will. I can help you, and you can help me. Together, we could change everything. Change what? Ethan asked, feeling a little frustrated. You're talking about some kind of royal duty, but I'm not interested in being your pawn in some intergalactic game. Liara stood still, her gaze intense and unwavering. It's not a game. My people are in danger. We've been at war for centuries, and only a union with a human can end it. You are the key, Ethan. Ethan took a step back, crossing his arms over his chest. So, what? You think just because I helped you fix your ship, I'm automatically the key to some galactic peace treaty? It's not that simple, Lyra said, her voice quieter now. The Starborn have long had an ancient prophecy. A human will bring peace, but only through a bond with the royal bloodline. You were chosen the moment you awoke me from my slumber. Whether you like it or not, we are connected now. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. So this isn't just about the ship or saving your people. You're saying I'm some kind of chosen one. Liara nodded, her eyes glowing faintly. Yes, you are. But you don't have to understand it all now. I'm asking you to trust me, Ethan. We can make this work. Ethan's mind was racing. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a diplomat or some chosen savior. He was just a mechanic who had gotten caught in something way over his head. But looking into Lyra's eyes, he couldn't deny the pull between them. There was something there, something deep and unspoken that made him hesitate. What's in this for me? He asked, trying to think logically. You keep talking about saving your people and ending the war, but what do I get out of this? Liara stepped closer, her voice soft, but filled with an undeniable power. What you get, Ethan, is the chance to be part of something greater than yourself. A chance to change the future, to shape the destiny of two worlds. And in time, you will see that what I'm offering is not just an alliance, but something more personal. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he looked into her eyes. He had heard of prophecies, of chosen ones, but this was real. He could feel the weight of her words, the weight of the future they were both bound to. He wasn't sure he believed in destiny, but in that moment, it was hard to ignore the pull he felt toward her. But what if I don't want this? Ethan said, his voice rough with uncertainty. What if I'm not ready for whatever it is you're offering? Lyra's smile was slow, almost teasing. You may not be ready, but the universe has already decided. And once the bond is made, you will be ready. I promise you that. Ethan didn't know what to say. The idea of being tied to a powerful alien princess, a being from a world so different from his own, was more than overwhelming. But as he stood there, staring into her eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already part of something much larger than himself. Liara stepped back, her voice firm. So, what will it be, human? Will you join me, or will I have to make you? Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. Lyara's words kept repeating in his head, spinning around like a whirlwind he couldn't escape. Will you join me, or will I have to make you? Her challenge echoed in his thoughts, a reminder that his life had changed forever. He had come to space to fix a ship, not to get tangled in a galactic prophecy. But here he was, the key to a peace he didn't understand, and a future he wasn't sure he wanted. He stood on the edge of the ship's observation deck the next morning, staring out at the stars. The vastness of space was breathtaking, but it also reminded him of how small he felt in all of this. A mechanic, a regular guy with no idea of what he was getting into. Now, somehow, he was connected to the fate of an entire species. Thinking about it again, aren't you? Lyra's voice cut through his thoughts. She was standing just behind him, her presence as powerful as ever. Ethan didn't turn around. It's hard not to, he said quietly. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, Lyra replied, her tone softer now. None of this was part of your plan. But it is your destiny. Ethan finally turned to face her. Her glowing violet eyes seemed to pierce through him, and despite himself, he felt a shiver run down his spine. She was stunning, unlike anyone he had ever known. But there was more to her than just her beauty. There was strength, power, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. I didn't want to be part of some prophecy, Ethan said, his voice firm. I'm just a mechanic. That's all I ever wanted to be. Lyra's lips curled into a small, almost sad smile. But you are more than that, Ethan. You have the power to shape what happens next. You just have to accept it. The weight of her words settled heavily in his chest. Ethan didn't know if he was ready for this kind of responsibility. He wasn't even sure what it meant to accept this new reality. He was a human on an alien ship, with an alien princess telling him that he was bound to change the future. Accept it, Ethan muttered. How can I accept something I don't understand? Liara stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to trust me. The bond between us isn't just a political alliance. It's deeper than that. You will feel it once we are united. Ethan shook his head, a frown tugging at his lips. I don't know. I can't just go along with this. It's too much. Lyra's expression softened. I never asked you to do anything you didn't want to. But I can't promise that this won't happen. The bond is already starting to form. You will feel it. And when you do, it will be undeniable. Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but stopped himself. He had felt something. Something he couldn't explain. Every time Lyra was near. There was a connection between them. Something that went beyond words. It was like a spark that grew stronger the more they were together. But that didn't mean he was ready to give in. Not yet. He had to think this through, figure out what he really wanted. He couldn't let himself be swept away by something he didn't understand. Lyra seemed to read his mind. I know this is difficult, she said, her voice gentle. But you must understand that this is not just about you and me. This is about saving both our people. If we don't form the bond, if you refuse, the peace between humans and Starborn will never happen. The war will continue. Ethan felt the pressure of her words settle over him like a weight. And if I do agree, what happens then? Lyra smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. If you agree, everything changes. The bond will unlock the power within you, power that you don't even know you have. Together, we will forge a future where our two species can thrive. No more war, no more fighting, only peace. Her words were like a promise, but they also felt like a trap. Peace, war, power, all these things swirled in Ethan's mind, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for any of it. Lyra was waiting for his answer, her gaze unwavering. He could see the hope in her eyes, the desperation to end the war and secure peace for her people. But was it worth everything, she was asking? Was it worth giving up his old life, his freedom and everything he knew? I don't know, Lyra, Ethan said, his voice thick with uncertainty. I don't know if I can do this. Lyra stepped even closer, reaching up to place a hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, almost electric, and it sent a strange shiver through his entire body. You don't have to do it alone. I will be with you every step of the way. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'm asking you to trust me. Ethan stood frozen, torn between the desire to walk away and the strange, undeniable pull he felt toward her. He didn't know if he was ready, but one thing was clear. Whatever he decided, his life would never be the same. The silence between them was heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Ethan stared at Lyra, unsure of what to do next. Her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light of the ship's corridors, seemed to see straight through him. She was waiting, calm and patient, but Ethan could feel the urgency in her gaze. Ethan, Lyra said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft but firm. The longer you wait, the harder it will become. The bond is already forming. You can feel it, can't you? Ethan swallowed, trying to push down the tension in his chest. "Yeah," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I feel it. Every time you're near, it's like something inside me. Something pulls me toward you." Liara stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "That's the bond. It's not just a feeling. It's our connection. The more you fight it, the stronger it will become. Trust me, Ethan. This is the only way forward." His heart was racing now, torn between fear and something else, a strange kind of longing. The truth was, he wasn't sure what was happening, but there was no denying that something had changed. The connection he felt with Liara was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. "I'm not ready," he said, shaking his head. "I'm just a mechanic, Liara. I'm not some hero. I don't know how to save anyone." Liara's gaze softened, her hand gently reaching out to touch his arm. "You don't have to be a hero. You only have to be you. What I need is someone who can understand the weight of what's at stake, someone who has the strength to choose peace." Ethan took a step back, his mind racing. Peace. The war between the Starborn and humans had been going on for centuries. The thought of ending it seemed impossible. Could he really be the one to change the course of history? "But how?" he asked, his voice thick with doubt. "How can I possibly do that? I'm just one person. You've spent your whole life preparing for this. I don't know the first thing about leading a war, let alone bringing peace." Liara's expression remained calm, almost serene. "That's why you need me. And I need you. Together, we balance each other. You have strength, even if you don't see it yet. It's inside you. The bond will bring it out." Ethan looked away, unable to meet her gaze. The pressure was suffocating, the weight of the decision threatening to crush him. He had never wanted this. He had never asked for any of it. All he wanted was to fix ships and live his quiet life. But now, that life seemed so distant, so far away from the reality he was being forced into. A life of peace, of saving people. It was all too much to comprehend. "What if I refuse?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Liara took a deep breath, her eyes darkening. "Then the bond will be lost, and peace will never come. The war will continue and more lives will be lost. I'll lose you, and the Starborn will lose their chance for salvation." Ethan clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. "You make it sound like I don't have a choice." "You do," Liara replied softly. "But the cost of that choice is something you'll have to live with." Ethan's mind spun. He could walk away. He could leave, find a way back to Earth and forget all of this. But the thought of that, of abandoning Liara and her people, made him feel sick. How could he turn his back on this, on her? How could he just walk away from the possibility of peace? "I don't want to make this choice," he muttered, his voice cracking under the weight of it. "I'm not ready." Liara stepped forward again, her hand now resting gently on his chest. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to make the choice. Trust that this is your destiny. Trust that this bond is not a curse, but a gift." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him where her hand touched him. It wasn't just physical warmth, though. It was something deeper, something that seemed to reach into his very soul. He could feel it, the power of the bond, the connection they shared. He couldn't deny it anymore. "But I don't understand it," he whispered, feeling the confusion rise again. "What happens next?" Liara smiled, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of hope and something deeper. "Next, we move forward together. We will form the bond, and with it, we will have the power to end the war. You'll see it, feel it, and you'll know it's the right choice." For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, his mind racing. The future was uncertain, and he had no idea what was waiting for him on the other side of this choice. But as he looked into Liara's eyes, he felt something in him stir. Maybe he wasn't just a mechanic after all. Maybe he had the strength inside him to do something bigger, something that could change everything. The moment of truth had arrived. Ethan took a deep breath and slowly, cautiously, nodded. All right, I'll do it. Lyara's eyes softened, and a smile spread across her face. Thank you, Ethan. You've made the right choice. Ethan's heart was racing, and the moment of decision still felt unreal. The words were out of his mouth before he even fully understood the weight of them. All right, I'll do it. Lyara's face lit up, a radiant smile spreading across her features. The joy in her eyes was undeniable, and for a brief moment, Ethan thought maybe, just maybe, this was the right thing to do. But doubt still gnawed at him. His mind was full of questions. Could he really be the one to end a war that had lasted for generations? Was he truly capable of wielding this strange power that Lyara spoke of? He was still just a man, a mechanic who had been thrown into the unknown. How could he possibly hold the key to peace? Lyara seemed to sense his hesitation. She stepped closer to him, her eyes softening. You don't have to understand it all right now, Ethan. Trust in the bond. Trust in us. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding as he tried to push his doubts aside. There was no turning back now. He had made his choice, and whatever happened next, he would have to face it. Lyara's hand reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek gently. The touch was warm, comforting, but there was also something electric about it. Ethan could feel a strange energy building between them, something that was beyond anything he had ever experienced. The bond, as she had called it, was awakening. Close your eyes, she whispered softly. Let it happen. Ethan hesitated for just a moment before he obeyed. He could feel the pulse of energy growing stronger, as if something was stirring deep within him, something that had been dormant until now. The air around them seemed to thrum with power, and for the first time, Ethan understood what Lyara had meant. The bond was not just a connection. It was a force. As he stood there, surrounded by the hum of the ship's engines and the quiet of the space around them, Ethan felt something shift. A deep, powerful warmth spread through his chest, and for a split second, he thought he might collapse under the intensity of it. But Lyara's presence anchored him, her hand on his arm grounding him. You're doing great, she murmured. Her voice was steady, calm, a contrast to the storm raging inside him. Trust me, Ethan. This is the beginning. Ethan's breath was shallow, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he allowed himself to focus, to center himself on the warmth that now flowed through his veins. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, like standing on the edge of a cliff, looking out into an unknown abyss. The fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but the pull of the bond was undeniable. What is this feeling? Ethan whispered, his voice thick with awe. This is the bond, Lyara explained, her voice low and soothing. It connects us on a deeper level. It allows us to share our strength, our will. You'll feel it more with each passing moment, and it will grow stronger. Soon, we'll be able to use it to change the fate of our people. Ethan opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. There was something different in her eyes now, something softer, more vulnerable. He had seen Lyara as a warrior, a princess, a leader. But in this moment, he saw her as something else, a woman who was placing her trust in him. And somehow, that made all the difference. I can feel it, Ethan said, his voice quiet but certain. I can feel the power. I don't know how to control it yet, but I feel it. Lyara smiled, her expression filled with pride. You're already stronger than you know, Ethan. This bond is a part of you now. It's in your blood. You will learn to control it, and when you do, you'll be able to do things you never dreamed possible. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm in his chest. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but with Lyara at his side, he felt like maybe he could face whatever came next. You said this bond could end the war, Ethan said, his voice steadying. How? Lyara looked at him with a mixture of hope and determination. With the power we now share, we can unite both of our peoples. The Starborn and humans are not so different. We have more in common than we realize. But our leaders, both of our races, they've been blinded by fear. The bond we share will show them that peace is possible." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He could see it now. They were not just fighting for peace. They were fighting to change the very course of history. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling. He glanced down at their joined hands, the connection between them glowing faintly, like a string of light. The power between them was undeniable. He had made his choice, and there was no going back. As Ethan looked up at Liara, he saw something in her eyes that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone in this. She was counting on him, yes, but he was also counting on her. They were in this together. "Let's do this," Ethan said, his voice filled with a newfound resolve. Liara's smile widened, and for the first time since their journey began, Ethan truly felt like he was part of something much bigger than himself. Together, they would change the future. The air around them was electric, filled with the hum of energy as the bond between Ethan and Liara grew stronger. They stood together, side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their mission was clear. They had to unite their people and end the war that had torn their worlds apart. Ethan looked out at the stars through the ship's viewport, his mind racing. This was it, the moment when everything would change. His hands were still warm from Liara's touch, the connection between them so strong that he could almost feel their thoughts as if they were his own. Liara stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the vastness of space. There was a calm determination in her eyes, but Ethan could see the flicker of worry behind them. This wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about bringing peace to two worlds that had been at war for so long. "We have one shot at this," Liara said quietly, breaking the silence. "If we fail, everything we've worked for will be lost. But if we succeed, we change the future of both our peoples." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of her words settled heavily on his shoulders, but it only made him more determined. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to back down now. They were in this together, and together, they could do the impossible. Liara turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Are you ready, Ethan? This is not going to be easy." He met her gaze with a firm resolve. "I'm ready." They moved together toward the heart of the ship, where the council of leaders from both races was waiting. The atmosphere was tense, charged with anticipation. The humans, with their advanced technology and military might, and the Starborn, with their ancient power and wisdom. Both sides were equally afraid of each other, and the fear had only fueled the war. As they entered the chamber, Ethan could feel the weight of the room's gaze on them. The leaders of both sides were seated around a large table, their expressions wary and calculating. The Starborn queen, Liara's mother, sat at the head of the table, her regal presence demanding attention. The human general, a tall man with a stern face, stood beside her, his posture rigid. Liara stepped forward, her voice strong and commanding. "We've come to show you the power of unity. The bond we share is the key to peace. We can end this war, but it requires trust. Trust in each other, and trust in what we can accomplish together." Ethan stood beside her, his presence calm but firm. He could feel the power between them, the energy that flowed through the bond they had formed. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was part of something bigger. He was part of the future. The Queen's eyes flickered between Liara and Ethan. "And what exactly do you propose, daughter?" Her voice was cold, but there was a hint of curiosity beneath it. Liara took a deep breath, glancing at Ethan before continuing. "We will show you. Together, we will connect our two peoples. We will end the war, not with weapons, but with the power of understanding." The human general crossed his arms, his face skeptical. "You expect us to simply lay down our arms and trust in some mystical bond?" "It's not mystical," Ethan said, his voice steady and confident. "It's real. We felt it. The power of unity is stronger than anything you've ever experienced. It's not about fighting. It's about sharing, understanding." The queen leaned forward, her gaze fixed on Ethan. "And what do you ask in return? You ask us to trust you, but what do you offer?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "We offer peace, a chance to rebuild, a future where both our peoples can live in harmony." The room fell silent as the leaders considered his words. There was a tension in the air, a heavy weight that seemed to press down on them all. Ethan could feel his heart racing, his breath coming in shallow gasps. This was the moment of truth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the queen stood. "Very well," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "We will give this a chance. But know this, if you fail, there will be no second chance." Liara stepped forward, her eyes shining with pride. "We won't fail. Together, we will change the future." As the council members stood and began to disperse, Ethan and Liara shared a quiet moment. The tension had lifted, but now a new weight had taken its place. The future was in their hands. Ethan turned to Liara, a smile tugging at his lips. "I guess we're not just saving the world anymore, huh?" Liara's smile matched his, her eyes bright with the same determination. "No, we're changing it." With that, the bond between them seemed to grow stronger than ever. They had done it. They had united their peoples. The war was over, and a new era had begun. The stars outside the ship's viewport no longer seemed so distant. They were no longer a symbol of separation, but of connection. And as Ethan and Liara looked out at them together, they knew that their journey was just beginning.